In this video, we're talking about how the PS5 Pro is the best hardware you can game on. Yes, even better than a PC. Then we're going to talk about how after a rocky 2024, the PS5 is back in the saddle. And finally, we're going to talk about some advice Sakurai gave Japanese developers and why I think it's going to pay off on PlayStation. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. And yeah, today's video is a stacked one. So I'm just going to roll right into it to explain to you why the PS5 Pro is the best piece of hardware you can buy if you want to get the best performance for the best price possible. So Assassin's Creed Shadows is out by the time you're watching this video. I gotta be real, not the game for me. I don't need an 80-hour open world RPG that's set in Japan. Just not really what I'm into right now, but I was watching the Digital Foundry breakdown of the graphics on the PS5 Pro versus the graphics on the PS5, and it is so beyond night and day that it's honestly kind of shocking. Like, the game on PS5, it looks pretty good. I'd recommend, just based on what I've seen, playing at the 30 FPS mode so you can get the maximum graphics potential out of this game. But it does have a performance mode that runs at 60 FPS most of the time, but the sacrifices you have to make to get that 60 FPS are pretty vast. Like, it looks not great when you're running it at 60 FPS. Honestly, it seems like a very similar situation to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where the 30 FPS mode looked really damn good, and the 60 FPS mode, you sacrificed a lot to get that 60 FPS, but if you really care about frame rates, it was a good 60 FPS. It seems very similar to that situation. But if you look at how it runs on the PS5 Pro, not only is it a hard lock 60 FPS across the board, you are getting features in this game that are better than the quality mode on the regular PS5 while retaining 60 FPS, and it looks just like a completely different game. Like, it looks like back in the day when you would get the Xbox version of a game and the Xbox 360 version, and it was like made by a different studio and was actually a different game, or honestly like the PS2 version versus the PSP version. It looks like that big of a jump when you put these two games side by side. The real driving factor is the global illumination, so how the light is casted all over the map. In the PS5 Pro version, on both the 30 FPS and 60 FPS modes, it's using ray traced global illumination, so it's not baked in, and this is a rare example where you're not really trading off performance in any way, but it's actually better than developers taking the time to actually place all the different lights in all the different scenes. And this game, once again, not really my style, but if you just look at the world and the level of detail they've been able to pack into this game's world and just how amazing it looks, it is mind-blowing. Even on the regular PS5, like, it is a very good looking open world, but when you see it with that RTGI, it is once again a night and day difference over what we're seeing on the base console. And the really interesting thing, though, is that if you compare it to the performance you'd get out of a 4080 graphics card, which the graphics card alone costs almost $1,000, you're getting more 1% lows that drop below 60 on a beefy PC with a 4080 graphics card than you're getting on the $700 PS5 Pro. And when you count that price, that almost $1,000 price tag of the graphics card on a PC, that's just one component. You're going to pay a couple $100 for the CPU, you're going to pay a couple $100 for the RAM, a couple $100 for the motherboard, you got to pay for the case, you got to pay for all these different pieces, including a desk, a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse. It's going to add up to a couple grand at minimum versus this $700 purchase, which you just plug into your already existing TV, use the included controller, and you're good to go. I'm not going to deny that the PS5 Pro got off to a rocky start. That price tag is still hard to swallow, but when you compare it to what you're paying for an equivalent PC, it's not a hard pill to swallow. Things are just going to get more expensive as time goes on, especially with this tariff situation. And if you compare it to all the PC hardware that's out there across the board, you're really getting a good deal on this console. But if you compare it to what you're paying for a Series X or a regular PS5, yeah, it's at least $200 more up front. I mean, it's even more than that if you compare it directly, because it doesn't come with a disc drive. So it's like $280 if you want to get the disc drive after the fact when you buy the console, or around that if you're going up from the digital version. But even with that in mind, the amount of performance you're getting out of this thing, especially when developers take the time to utilize it correctly, it is definitely worth the money. Like, I have a really beefy PC. I've got a Razer Blade with a 4090 in it, and the 4090 mobile is on par around with a desktop 4080 Super. I've got a 14th gen Intel chip that is one of the ones that's not messed up. I've got 32 gigs of RAM, and honestly, even with that, I'm more likely to play a game like Assassin's Creed Shadows on my PS5 Pro because I won't get the classic Ubisoft stutter. I've been playing Far Cry 5 on my PC. I saw it was on sale for $8 on PS5. I'm buying it for the Pro just because all of those weird little issues that Ubisoft's engines have on PC, they just straight up don't exist on console. And it's just what I always talk about, where at the end of the day, I want to get good performance out of a game and I want to get into it as fast as possible. I don't want to screw around with frame rate limiters or turning on VSync in the NVIDIA control panel versus doing it in the game. I don't want to mess with that stuff. I'm going to get a great experience out of the PS5 Pro. And now there's like an extra bonus where it's outperforming my PC that cost a lot more. I think this thing was like around $3,000 and it's getting lapped by the PS5 Pro. If you've been on the fence, I would say just take the leap. If you're someone who doesn't care about performance and doesn't really care about graphics and you're fine with 30 FPS modes, I'd say you're fine on the regular PS5. But if you're someone who bought the PS5 and fell in love with how it was running games at 60 FPS because they were cross-gen titles and you were hoping you'd get that once they actually got to native PS5 games, which is what we're at now with games like Kingdom Come and Assassin's Creed Shadows, I'd say it is worth buying because the situation is only going to get better as time goes on. Like if Ubisoft, one of the most notorious developers for rushing products, just throwing them out the door, I know they delayed AC Shadows multiple times to actually finish it. There is a lesson to be learned there, obviously, with what people will praise when you actually finish your games. Like if even them are the ones actually taking advantage of the PS5 Pro, imagine how games like Ghost of Yotei or Intergalactic or X, Y, and Z, like any of these first party games that are coming out for Sony, imagine how those are going to look and run on this console. I think it's going to be pretty damn awesome. Going into this generation, Sony was very clear that they wanted the PS5 to be the premier premium destination for gaming, and I think they've definitely hit that point. I've just been burned so many times by buying the middle tier option. Like I've been getting into golf, so I bought a pair of lefty clubs on Facebook Marketplace. They were a little short, but I figured I could learn on them. I am kicking myself in the butt for not just paying a couple $100 more for a set of clubs that actually fits my length. I think this thing is completely worth it. Even that game I mentioned earlier, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you get better graphics than the quality mode on the regular PS5 version in the performance mode, and it runs at a rock solid 60 FPS. So if you're someone who wants to get a PS5 so you can play these games first, like you have a PC and you've been interested in a PS5, you're going to want a PS5 Pro. If you're someone who wants to retain the great performance of launch titles on the regular PS5, grab a PS5 Pro. If you're someone who thinks it's too expensive and you don't mind playing games at 30 FPS for quality mode or 40 to 60 randomly dropping all the time, I would say stick with the PS5. Like if you don't mind that, PS5 is good for you. But sticking with talking about hardware, we got to talk about the sales numbers on the PlayStation 5 because some interesting things are happening. So we get numbers from Circana basically every quarter when Sony releases their sales figures, and over 2024 things were not going the way I think Sony would really want. I mean, they started this generation with the PS5 vastly outselling the PS4. Like it was doing better sales wise month over month by every metric, and that was awesome. Going into last year when we had that big lack of big games, it really started to fall behind, and it was just hovering at about the same amount of PS5s being sold as PS4s. If you lined up the timelines, well, now that we have a lot of games out that people are interested in, it looks like the PS5 is once again taking the lead. It's up by about 7% if you line up the timelines, and with big games like Ghost of Yotei, like Intergalactic, like Grand Theft Auto 6 coming out in the next year or so, I could see that gap widening. And the reason this is important is because a lot of the mouthpieces, specifically in the Xbox camp, I know I'm always shitting on them, but they keep doing this. They've been saying there's only 150 million people who buy hardware. We need to look in other areas like PC, mobile, streaming games, like TV streaming, all this random stuff that is outside of what the console is. And I just have always disagreed with that. It's clear that gaming is growing, even if it's still staying at 150 million people, because that shows that as people age out of gaming, there's always people in the younger generation that are willing to replace them. Now, there are problems that obviously crop up, like the fact that younger people only play the same 2 games forever, like Fortnite is just dominating all the time, GTA Online is dominating all the time, people are playing single player games less and less. Those are legitimate problems that need to be solved, but I think the answer is clearly making games that people want to buy. Don't just do the same cookie cutter stuff over and over again. Like actually take the time to not only only finish your games, but innovate on the mechanics and systems that you've actually developed for the previous games and try to do something new. It is always worth doing something new versus doing the same thing over and over again, because when you do that, you're always going to get diminishing returns, and that's what hurts gaming. Not the fact that people aren't buying hardware, because as we've seen proven over and over again, time and time again, when you make games people want to play, they will go out and buy hardware. I don't understand why everyone has been brainwashed into thinking that that's not the key. I understand that Xbox has had a tough time, but really, when you look at what they've been putting out, Forza Motorsport sequel after Forza Motorsport sequel, Halo sequel after Halo sequel, Gears sequel after Gears sequel, Forza Horizon sequel after Forza Horizon sequel, with very little innovation in between, it's very obvious why people are choosing PlayStation over them. I mean, I was at the gym earlier, and between sets, I was looking at Twitter. The PlayStation official Twitter tweeted out 5 indie games that are coming out on PlayStation throughout the rest of the year, and then Shuhei yesterday tweeted out one called Clairn, which he called the Dark Souls of climbing games. Like, you don't see that originality coming out of the Xbox camp ever. You see it out of the Nintendo Switch camp, you see it out of Steam, you definitely see it out of PlayStation, but like, the key has always been having good innovative games, and that's what's going to continue to grow the market, and that's why the PS5 is trailing ahead of the PlayStation 4, even though it was falling behind for just a little bit. And shockingly, during that time period, there were no big innovative games that people wanted to play. That is and always will be the key. Speaking of being innovative though, I was reading an article on Push Square that kind of condensed an interview that Sakurai did. He's the guy who makes like Super Smash Brothers over at Nintendo, so clearly a dude who knows about making good innovative games. I mean, honestly, he's one of the best in the entire industry. Like, I'm a PlayStation fan, but I do love some Nintendo from time to time. I'll spare you the entire quote because the gist of it is pretty easy to sum up. He's talking about the state of the Japanese games industry and where it's kind of gone wrong, and the thing that he hammered down on them was stop trying to westernize your games. And it feels like when you read these quotes, he's looking directly at Square Enix with this, because I think that's the biggest problem they've kind of walked into with games like Final Fantasy 16, and even to some extent Final Fantasy 7 and Rebirth. Like, I really like those games because of the westernized elements that they have, but maybe they just never were for me in the first place. Like, I've never been a huge turn-based JRPG fan. Ever since I picked up Halo 1 back in the day, I've always been an action first-person shooter, like minute-to-minute stuff going on all the time. I do play my map games from time to time, like Total War Napoleon. That's one I go back to regularly. I like that Oregon Trail game Gameloft put out a couple of years ago, but like outside of that, I've never really been a huge JRPG fan, and I think it's always better, if you are that kind of person, to stop waiting for developers to kind of reformat their entire type of game to suit you, because it's never going to be as good as you envisioned it in your head, because they don't know how to make that kind of game, and then it shits on the audience who actually does like those games and has been there to support them. So you look at games like Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 16, and compare them to games that are coming out from Atlas, like Persona 3 Reload, Persona 5 Royal, and then that new one, what's that new one called? Metaphor ReFantazio, that's the one I was thinking of. Those are games that are built in the classic JRPG format, but they try to do new and innovative things with every game that comes out, and they reap the rewards from doing that. Like, they're making games for people in Japan, but people in America who enjoy that type of game, like my friend Dustin over at Sacred Symbols or Brad over at Summon Sign, they love those kind of games, and they feel better, I think, when they play games that are actually made for Japanese audiences, and then they get to experience them as they were intended. It's always weird when Japanese developers try to make westernized games, because you could just tell that they're not really into it. They're like just trying to chase a number or the amount of copies sold of westernized games like Call of Duty, instead of making something they actually want to make. And I feel like that should always be the crux of what's going on. So when studios go out of their way to just do stuff on purpose that are going to piss off their fans, I don't really know what the end goal is there for that, but it really just bums me out, because like, when you support studios for decades and then they make a huge change and you notice it, but then you run laps in your head trying to defend it, it's just a crappy situation to be in, because at the end of the day, what you're making is important for sure, obviously, because it's a video game and people love playing video games and talking about video games. But I don't know if I'm crazy, but that's not what I come to video games for, man. Like, I come to video games like Death Stranding at the end of the day to relax, unwind, and not think about what's going on in the world outside. Like, I don't need my whole perspective on life and the world around me to change from playing The Last of Us Part 2. I just don't care. So yeah, I think Sakurai is definitely onto something. Games should be made for their audience first and foremost. Like if you've built up a huge audience over a lot of decades, like spitting in their face is never the right move. And I feel like a lot of other developers could definitely learn that lesson. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.